Det är måndag den 12 juni och det här är Trading Direkt Healthcare. Idag pratar vi bland annat om Bioinvent, vi pratar om Egetis Therapeutics och om Calliditas. Bredvid mig här står Magnus Berné med energi som en nyutexaminerad student. Hej Magnus!
Ja men hej!
Ja, en ny måndag, nytt program. Du har en gäst som vanligt. Vem är det och vad ska ni prata om?
Absolut, det är Pareto-analytikern Dan Akschuti och vi ska prata om Bioinvents resultat som de har visat. Vi ska prata om Egetis Therapeutics, fokus på sällsynta sjukdomar och forskning inom det och den förändrade rekommendation som de har gjort, bakgrunden till det. Och sen ska vi avrunda med lite Calliditas och där har vi ju faktiskt dagsfärska nyheter som vi kan prata om.
Det har vi, men då säger jag varsågod till dig och Dan Akschuti.
Tack.
Varsågod.
Hi Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi Magnus, thank you.
Let's start off with Bioinvent. They announced results that they've seen an additional patient that developed a partial response. How do you value these updated results?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the company has not released a lot of details, so it's very difficult to kind of evaluate the results properly. So what we know now that they have reported 2 partial responses in melanoma or melanoma subtypes like uveal melanoma. And those are long-lasting, stable disease. But they have treated, to my understanding, because they also did not press release the exact number of treated patients in that trial in that last press release. But from my understanding, it's 17 patients in total. So, and it seems that melanoma is responding, but they treated also other cancers. So it's important for us to know if they had 4 melanoma patients in that trial or if they had 12, because then you can better sort the results. So if it's 12 melanoma patients and 2 respond, then obviously it's not as good as if it's 3 melanoma patients and 2 respond. But either way, one has to consider that the patients Bioinvent is treating are like the worst ones actually you would want to have in a clinical trial. It's the late end stage patients that have no more options. They've been through many treatment lines. They are not responding to the PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors like Keytruda and Opdivo, which are these kind of backbone of modern cancer therapy now, where you circumvent the escape mechanism of cancer cells from the immune system. So we know that these patients are progressing, they are not responding to anything, and then you do have a few that respond. So it's still a good sign considering how heterogeneous cancer is, both in the patient and among different patients, because as you, and I think your viewers know, cancer changes over time, even in the patient. And the patient, even at the same time, has different cancer cells. So there's cells that express, for instance, PD-L1 and others that don't express cell at the very same time. So it's a very, very difficult disease. So I think it's still a promising result. It's a bit, one would hope that the company progresses a bit faster. That's another topic maybe, but at least they don't burn as much cash as the companies that do progress fast.
What do you think about the strategy of going of the end stage patient first and then maybe move on to earlier advancement in the treatment?
Unfortunately, for these kind of treatments, it's a bit Bioinvent is a bit forced to go for these patients in this very early trial where we don't know much about Bioinvent's drugs yet. But after that, they will be able to actually go into some earlier patients, and they were able to do so for a second asset that will read out, I think, later this month, where they were lucky with a Russian patient that they obviously lost now due to the situation there, but that patient was a checkpoint naive patient, meaning that patient has not received Keytruda or something similar. And even though they didn't treat that patient with a checkpoint inhibitor, it's still that the immune system is still more there than in patients at the end, because also the immune system there is destroyed. The cancer is less aggressive, and they actually got a response there with only their drug, so not in combination. So that's also a very promising sign. So we will see if they got more of these patients, but I think it will take time for Bioinvent to be able to go into earlier lines where we see more signals.
And another interesting point is that BI 1206 is developed under a combination with Keytruda. But what do you see as the main pros and cons going in combination or going as a monotherapy?
I think if you go as a monotherapy and you have the chance to treat patients that are not too refractory, then you have a chance to show monotherapy efficacy, which then is what pharma likes the most. That's what they like to see, even if it doesn't often doesn't translate later into better results, and programs are still terminated. But that's I think what's attracting pharma a lot. But otherwise, in the end, the cancer drugs need to be combined. So I think it's good to combine and see how the safety profile holds up. And I think that's an advantage of Bioinvent, that their safety of their drugs is really good so far. And that allows them to combine. And that's anyway, you need to combine the drugs in cancer. The cancer is not it's not the disease that is only driven by one factor, and you can block it, and then it's done. So, yeah.
Let's take a look on the share price graph, and as we always do here, it's like history from 12 months back, and we can see it's been a downward slope the last year. What do you see as a target price in relation to the share price now? And
yeah, it's a good question. So we saw earlier with the US kind of market downturn that the US stocks came down, and the biotech stocks on the Nasdaq biotech index NBI, there were dozens or more, quite a few more, maybe even 100 at one point, that were trading below cash. And now Bioinvent, now Sweden has had that as well, a bit more, that followed a bit later, and not just Bioinvent went down, but now Bioinvent is trading below the liquid funds that they have. And I think it's also, besides the macro, which I think is certainly the biggest factor here, is also that they had a long period of no real news. It takes time to conduct these studies. And yeah, as mentioned, Bioinvent is maybe not the fastest. At the same time, they are running now four drugs in clinics as a fairly small company. So that's quite something. Most other peers have one or two. So it does take some time, and then if there's no news flow, and these shares are mainly traded by retail in the Nordics and maybe some bigger retail, but that's still those that are trading these stocks. So it's not that you have big global funds that are trading the stock. They might have invested in the company, as we know in Bioinvent's case. They did, but they don't trade. They just wait for many years until the programs. So they invested into the programs, and they don't look at the stock for many years. So that's a bit of a different way to look at it.
And before going on to the next company, could you just tell me the share price triggers in Bioinvent?
Yeah, so they should have, end of this month, they should have a readout from the TNFR2 targeting drug, BI 1808. Where they showed the single agent efficacy in that patient that was checkpoint naive. But only treating with their drug. And now I'm not sure if they have more of these patients, but it will be very interesting to see what they see in that next readout. So that's a trigger. But then they will also have some others, like they changed the 1206 formulation from intravenous to subcutaneous. Makes it more comfortable and gets rid of the issues of infusion-related reactions. and there they should also have a readout now in the second half in NHL and also update on solid tumors. And then we should also get some first signs of 1607, yet again another drug, and then some more starts. So they will start the fifth drug, and also they will start the combination of the oncolytic virus that they have with CTLA-4 that they will then combine also with a checkpoint inhibitor. So a lot is going on, but it takes time. So one that invests in Bioinvent needs to invest into the assets and then wait for the company to go through all that, and the share price is driven by macro as well. So in better times it would have risen. In these times it is the other way around. But important, the fundamentals are good in the company and it's progressing. And I think one can get comfort by having the kind of shareholders that Bioinvent has, which are our global specialist funds.
So let's move on to the next company, and that would be Egetis Therapeutics, and then we are within the research for ultra-rare diseases. Here you made downgraded recommendations on the 30th of May, and you took down the recommendation to hold from buy, and the target price was reduced to 14 kronor from 24 kronor. Still, this is well above the current share price. Could you describe what you did to the recommendation and target price?
Yeah, that's a very difficult case for us because we believe in the drug. I mean, many patients are being currently treated with the drug. It's a complex issue, genetic defect, but solved in a very simple way. So the genetic defect does not allow thyroid hormone to go into cells, into some cells. Because of a transporter that is defect, and the Emcitate, the lead drug of Egetis, is an analog to that doesn't need a transporter, and it gets into the cells, and we saw enough data to see that this is working. But the company is really progressing extremely slow. So it's not the first time, because as you know, they have a second asset, Aladot, that has not really progressed since 2019. And they have continuously said they would progress it. And if you go back into their quarterly reports, you can see that it will start first half of this year and then second half of that year, and it just doesn't move. And for Emcitate, they had December 21 when they gave the guidance that they can submit in Europe with the data they have already to the European Medicines Agency, and that they need to run a 16-patient small study for the FDA, where I understand that it's probably difficult to get the parents to agree to such a study, where they need to take off their small kids off a drug that is helping for a while, a month, and then put them back on just to see that the thyroid hormone levels changing, which is what the FDA wanted to see. So I guess that can be a difficult and understandable factor from an ethical perspective. But still, it's now more than a year, 1.5 years since that communication, and the study has still not started. Management has continuously told me that things will start in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, but yeah, months have passed and nothing has started. So that ended up in this weird situation that we have a hold rating, but the target price of 14. And I think in general, these stocks are very volatile, so you can't use the whole definition in the same way as you can for bigger companies and less volatile stocks. But here it's because the company kind of, from my perspective, has been a bit on hold. Of course, they've been working, but the progress has not been visible, at least, while the prospects are still there. So that is why we decided to put it as a hold until they do the things that we laid out, so that they start the study, conclude the study, and they actually submit to EMA. So it's kind of a hold until they actually do it and then buy. So it's a hold buy.
Would you actually say it could be a trust issue with the current management?
it's obviously not helping to me personally if I can't rely on the words when talking to the CEO, and then things don't come, and that over multiple times. So it's a bit of a trust issue. And as mentioned, there can be lots of issues for such a study that is in small kids that are difficult to tackle. But then I would hope that the company is just a bit more transparent and communicates more often, and maybe proactively comes out with, hey, we're going to be delayed by that amount of time because this and that, and not just that things don't happen and then you hear of it at the quarterly report again. And I think that is a bit of an issue.
We not so long time ago had these bid discussions about the Egetis, which the management confirmed. Then they were terminated. What do you read into this?
It's very difficult to read anything into that. So as mentioned, I think the drug is promising. There can be concerns like that the active component of the drug, or actually pretty much the same variant as it is formulated now, has been available in Europe in the past, in France to be specific, but that should not affect anything in the US. I mean, the company is still doing all the clinical trials. There's another important clinical trial that is ongoing, which could also be a hidden reason for the delays. Because that will influence pricing, and that is the effect on the neurocognitive parameters on the patients. So they enrolled very, very early, 0 to 30 months patients in that trial that will read out in the first half of 24, maybe Q1 24. And if they show a strong effect there, that will really help them to get a better case for the drug and also better pricing. And that could be a hidden, non-communicated reason why things are being delayed, so that the approvals follow after that readout. That's a speculation, but that's still, from a commercial perspective, would make sense. Yeah.
So before we go to the share price graph, you were talking about the delays, and we've been talking about downgraded recommendations. But to summarize, what would you need to see to be able to make an upgrade to buy again?
Yeah, it's as we wrote in the last update, and it might always change. Everything is subject to changes if we see other signals, but we wrote now in the last update that we want to see them to start the study, to conclude it because it's a fast study, and to submit to the EMA, and then I think it will be a buy again if everything else looks good as well. Could it become a buy earlier? That is also possible, and as we can see with this exotic combo of the rating and the target price, the upside is really there. We just need the company to execute.
And then let's put in the share price graph, and we can see the volatile development this share price have had during the last 12 months. And let me just guide you through a little bit there. You had advancement in December 2022 when, for example, Carnegie raised their target price, and also ABG pointed out that Egetis was their top pick for 2023. And then you saw pressure in the share price again when in January Egetis raised 210 million kronor. And the next big jump here is the confirmation about the bid talks in March. And then in May, 2 months later, they mentioned that they terminated these talks, and the share price plunged. So let's move over to next company, and that is Calliditas. You lowered your target price to 230 kronor from 260 kronor after the Q1 report. Could you guide us through the change?
Yeah, it's mainly because of their slow execution in general. So also they have launch the drug much slower than one should, and it happens unfortunately to every second biotech and also some of the pharma companies launches. But overall, it's still progressing well. It's just a bit slower than we hoped, and I think indirectly the sparsentan launch will help Calliditas because it's another 80 salespeople, more than Calliditas has, that started selling end of February. And I think that still creates disease awareness. It pushes doctors to prescribe drugs for that disease to their patients, to screen their patients better, to see if they really have it. And then usually what happens with any kind of product, if you're buying a new mobile phone, you might compare, or if you buy a new car, you might compare between two cars, especially if there are only two things available, and currently there are two drugs approved. So it indirectly also markets for Calliditas, which could have already translated to the strong enrollment that they reported in March. So we'll see, but we took down our estimates, which are basically at the lower end of the companies. So for this year, it's around 1.4 billion SEK in total revenues, including milestones, which we expect one from China second half of this year. But it's a company that managed to get the drug approved. It's a safe drug. It's an effective drug. They showed all they need to show. And it's just launched the drug slow. And maybe also with not a wrong focus, but kind of one can question the focus because they have been directing, they targeted the kind of high profile nephrologists, the top kidney centers, but the best nephrologists, the best kidney doctors, they are aware of a new drug coming, so you might not even need to sell it to them much. So you should really go everywhere, and that is what Travere is actually doing. So that is maybe also a reason why the uptake has been slower than expected.
One interesting aspect here is the other markets they have the partner Everest Medicines in China, and looking at the prevalence, it's for this rare kidney disease, it's said to be higher in China. So it's interesting to hear from you. How do you value China in this?
Yeah, so it's a question I get often, and unfortunately, because of just lessons from many other drug launches, I don't value China until we can see something happening there. And also the partner that Calliditas has looks like a good partner, but if I'm not mistaken now, they've gotten only one drug approved in China so far, so it's not like a big Chinese pharma company that has had a big success in the past. So it's a wait and see. It's still going to give them milestone payments, which could be $10 million plus this year. But we don't know how the sales will be. The prevalence is high, the population is big, but that doesn't per se translate into great sales. So I think it's more of a wait and see. And Japan could actually be more interesting. Usually Japan is the third biggest market for drug sales. There's US, Europe, and then Japan. So it's not that China, despite its population, is a bigger one, or India or so. So that's something to consider.
Yes, just let us just mention a little bit about Europe as well. What's your view on that market?
Yeah, it has been going also very, very slow, much slower than in the US, which is maybe not surprising, but it's still even slower than we thought. STADA launched in end of September and has not really sold much. And the focus has been on Germany, and now they're going into other countries. So it has been going also slow. Maybe it was not the biggest priority for STADA. So we'll see how it goes, but we kind of removed most of the European revenues expectations for this year. But let's see. So it's a potential upside if they deliver in Europe.
When we're looking at the peak sales, you estimate a $1.2 billion in 2027 and 2028. What will need to happen to reach this number? Is there a potential upside or do you see risks?
So they really need to penetrate the whole market. So far, they have reached around 1,000 prescribers. They're around 12,000 just in the US. And I think that is, so they need to do more disease awareness campaigns because it's a slow progressing disease, non-symptomatic, affecting young people often that have maybe not the same health sense. Maybe now it increased after COVID, but it's different. They don't go as often to the doctor as older people. So I think there the company has to do a lot of work because the disease progresses over 10 to 20 years until you get to end-stage renal disease and have serious issues. So I think that is an area where they need to do more. And I think from that perspective, it's good that there are other drugs coming, sparsentan being approved. Who knows if it will stay on the market? They still need to show effect on kidney filtration rate, and other drugs are coming as well. As you could see, there has been an acquisition announced just now. But I think more disease awareness, getting to more prescribers, and then they should get to that. And these estimates are based on US and Europe, so we don't base that on other regions. The market is there, the patients are there, the price is what it is, so it's absolutely possible, but they need to work harder.
And talking about treatment periods, they were talking about in Q1 that they could see people stay on the treatment for a longer time. How could that affect the sales estimation you have?
Yeah, so I think that is something we kind of wrote about, that it's to be expected. If a drug is safe and is working, you're usually not just removing it. If the disease is a autoimmune disease as it is here, that is not going away with Calliditas drugs, so that is it's not a cure, it just it blocks the process. So that was kind of expected, but we didn't model that. So we still modeled the 9 months course per year, but I think it's the majority have stayed on drug according to Calliditas, and I think it's a very good sign for the drug that it's safe, that patients tolerate it, and that the kidney function is stabilized, and everyone's happy and just want to stay on the drug.
We also have a recent news within this kind of field that we need to talk about. It's the Chinook acquisition from Novartis. What can we read into this?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's definitely one of the more interesting candidates in pipeline. Yet it's if you compare Chinook to Travere, so they have similar drugs in some way, but Chinook has a more specific mechanism, one could say, and with that it allows a Chinook's drug to be combined with the current standard of care, which are these angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, because there is less risk of inducing more hypertension or low blood pressure as with sparsentan. It also doesn't have a sulfonamide group, which has caused this REMS requirement, this risk mitigation strategy, which forces Travere to do the liver monitoring and to do some extra precautions. So that is also not present in Chinook's drug. So you have a drug that is doing more or less the same as sparsentan, but without the side effect, at least a big portion of those issues and the REMS requirement, most likely. So that's in that sense a good drug, but it's still the mechanism that it has is still very related to sparsentan, and it's more of a vasodilative mechanism. So while Calliditas drug is targeting the origin of the disease, where these IgAs and IgGs are the IgAs are formed in the wrong way, and they form oligoplexes, and then you have IgGs coming to it and produces these clumps. So that production is stopped with Calliditas drug, as we know with the data that is certainly happening. And sparsentan or atrasentan from Chinook, they are, I imagine it in a way as if the vessels in the kidney, everything is kind of dilated and allows it to, these clumps that are arriving from the antibodies that are then attract the immune system that causes the inflammation, that these clumps are kind of flushed away. So these drugs have a mechanism that is not directed to the origin, but that is still kind of having an effect on flushing out what's there. Is it enough? I have a big question mark on that, because so far we have not seen any kidney filtration rate data from either of those, while Calliditas had such data already early on from their phase 2 trials. So I think that's a clear sign that Calliditas drug is more effective on the kidney, and what you care is the kidney. You don't care about proteinuria in the end. That's a marker, the protein in urine, the creatinine in urine. It can be affected by taking creatinine supplements. So it's a very it's a clear marker for the disease, but it's also a marker for many other things. So you do need to see the effect on the kidneys. So if the kidneys are losing filtration rate or not, if you're stabilizing them, and that's what Calliditas showed already in phase 2. It then showed it in phase 3, and then showed it again this year with long-term data. And we have not seen anything from these others. So it's interesting that Novartis pays around 6 times the market cap of Calliditas for this drug, but there's also a second drug, to be fair. So there's a second drug that will go into phase 3 from Chinook in IgA nephropathy as well, that could also have other indications that Novartis thinks of. One has to see that pharma companies rarely run one disease with a drug. So they go into multiple diseases. They have the money to do lots of clinical trials, and one can imagine that they will do that with these drugs that Chinook has. So they have probably bigger plans, and they assess the kind of net present value of the company in a different way than just the IgA nephropathy is what I would assume. Because the second drug is an interesting one in the sense that it is anti-inflammatory in a broad way, that it downregulates B cell pathways. So that could be also a critical part in their reasoning why they acquired it. But I think it's still kind of a risky move from Novartis to buy this right now, because the phase 3 readout from atrasentan will come end of this year. Maybe going through CDAs, etc., which they can do. They have seen some effect on the kidney that we have not seen. So that is possible. But we will know more about in Q4. But no, pharma doesn't always do right choices either. We noted on another indication in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis in 2020 on Promedior's, Roche acquiring Promedior, that we didn't see that the drug is effective there, and now actually terminated all the programs related to PRM-151, the drug from Promedior, this year. So it's good for investors of Chinook, absolutely.
Yeah. So before I let you go, let's put on a share price graph so we can see over the last 12 months, and we're trading around 91 kroner. And as we said before, your updated target price is 230. What needs to happen to get there?
Yeah, they need to increase sales now. So I hope Q2, and from what we hear from the company, will be much stronger than what they reported in Q1. So let's hope they will deliver on that. And I think that will be moving the stock up again. And with that fears that I've been hearing from some investors that Calliditas, will they need money again? I think will disappear again, because I really don't think that they need to raise capital. So they should be able to report the better Q2 numbers than Q1, a stronger increase in sales, and I think that will help the stock to come back and hopefully go further than where it has been.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we need to follow this up. I want to thank you for being part of the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tack så mycket för det, Magnus och Dan Akschuti. Det är alltid väldigt intressant att lyssna på era intervjuer, måste jag säga.
Ja.
Men nu är det dags att gå över till en marknadsuppdatering och vi ska börja med Bioarctic där det var ett FDA-kommittémöte i fredags.
Fredags eftermiddag och kväll, det är en långdragen sak. Började klockan 4 och sen slutar på sena kvällen på fredagen där. Varför är det här intressant? Det är ju då, de har ett villkorat godkännande i USA för Leqembi. Men den här rådgivande panelen med 6 experter som man hade då, de ska ju titta på risknyttan av det här läkemedlet och sen kommer de ju fram med en fråga om de tycker att de ser risknytta från Clarity AD-studien. Och det gjorde man. Och det är ju inte förvånande kanske om man tittar på vad de hade för resultat. De hade starka resultat i fas 3 som vi pratat om tidigare. Nu var det ju en enhällig rekommendation om godkännande. 6-0. Ingen avstod. Så ett klart tecken på att det här tycker experterna att man ska godkänna. Och brukar man då följa de här rekommendationerna? Det kan man ju fråga sig. När det gäller Aduhelm för 2 år sedan nu, där var det ett kontroversiellt godkännande för där sa panelen nej. Det vill vi inte godkänna, men så vänder det ändå här då. I det här fallet har vi en enhällig rekommendation från experterna och jag skulle bli förvånad när vi har PDUFA-datum, det vill säga när man ska ta besked här nu om mindre än en månad, början på juli. Och om vi inte får se ett fullständigt godkännande för Leqembi i USA.
Jag håller med dig, det är fantastiskt med tennissiffror i det sammanhanget. Men vad händer med subventionering och hela den biten?
Det är jätteviktigt. Och det är ju CMS då som styr det här. Och de indikationer vi har fått då, det är ju att får vi bara det här fullständiga godkännandet så kommer nog det som ett brev på posten ganska snabbt. Och det vill man ju ha då för att kunna öka upp användningen av behandlingen av Alzheimers. Det finns ett väldigt stort behov och kanske den springande punkten på det här, det är väl just det här att man har en ökande efterfrågan, men ännu så länge har man ju mest sett de här symptomlindrande behandlingen som behandlar liksom symptomen men inte själva sjukdomen. Vilket innebär att så fort du tar bort de här symptomlindrande behandlingen, ja då kommer ju symptomen tillbaka plus att sjukdomen ligger och tickar i bakgrunden så den blir värre och värre och Alzheimers är en dödlig sjukdom så tänkte säga, det här är ett välkommet tillskott.
Efter det här beskedet från kommittén då, har det kommit några reaktioner från analytikerhåll?
Ja, men om vi tittar på vad DNB sa så sa de ju då att efter det här mötet så ser man en 95% sannolikhet för att man får globalt godkännande, alltså inte bara i USA utan globalt i både Europa och man har ju partner med Eisai, japanskt bolag, så där har man också sökt. Plus att vi då i veckan fick vi faktiskt veta att man har inlämnat då ansökan om marknadsgodkännande i Sydkorea. Så det är flera länder som kommer där och det är hög sannolikhet med de här resultaten att man kommer och gå vidare här. Tittar man på tänkte sig också vad det här kan betyda. Så det här kan ju betyda ett ökat intresse. Om man ser från potentiella förvärvade av Bioarctic skulle jag tycka var väldigt tråkigt faktiskt. För man har ju AstraZeneca, du har Sobi, du har inte så många bolag i det här mellansegmentet som inte är så här forskande bolag utan som ligger emellan Big Pharma och de forskande bolagen. Men då skulle jag väl egentligen vilja säga att du har 2 vägar att se på det. Ju mer Bioarctic-aktien stiger så blir det ett skydd mot förvärv. Men samtidigt, de är ju en liten spelare. För när jag tittade lite här på börsvärdena, ja du kan titta på Eisai till exempel. Ja, de är 7 gånger större än Bioarctic. Så det skulle inte vara så särdeles svårt om de verkligen vill göra någonting. Tittar du på Biogen då som samarbetar med Eisai i sin tur. Ja, men då är ju de nästan 15 gånger större. Så det är klart, det skulle ju inte vara jättesvårt kanske att plocka bort dem från marknaden, vilket jag tycker i så fall skulle vara synd.
Hur reagerade marknaden då? Hur rörde sig aktiekursen efter det här beskedet?
Det blev lite positiva rörelser. Först då fick man ju det här inför-dokumentet som vi hade i torsdags. Och när det här kom, och det indikerade ju också då positiva signaler på att man skulle få den här rekommendationen enhälliga rekommendationen som man fick. Och då var aktien upp knappt 5% på torsdagen. Och sen nu när jag tittade i morse då, för det var ju stängt när mötet var klart och omröstningen så öppnade den upp ungefär 5-6%. Och sen när jag tittade innan vi gick in i sändning här, då hade det gått tillbaka lite igen, så då var det upp 1% ungefär. Och ja, vad kan man då säga? DNB då, när de kom ut här nu igen, de hade ju upprepade sin köprekommendation och har en riktkurs på 430 kronor. Så det är ju helt klart intressant att följa vad som sker.
Alldeles. Då går vi vidare till 2 kapitalanskaffningar och vi börjar med Mendus som har gjort emissioner.
Har gjort flera emissioner, en riktad och en företrädesemission. Totalt ska de ta in 317 miljoner kronor. Och riktade emissionen den går på 90 miljoner kronor. Och där har vi ju en gammal gäst som är med här som man kan titta på om man vill se mer. Vi pratade ju med Thomas Eldered på Bioinvent. Och de går in här nu då.
Vad var villkoren i den här emissionen?
Ja, då tänker du på företrädesemissionen om 227 miljoner kronor. Där hade du villkor på 7:3. Det betyder ju då att sitter man på 3 aktier av Mendus, ja, men då har du rätt att nyteckna 7 aktier med en teckningskurs som motsvarar då en kurs på 0,48 kronor per aktie. Tittar man på vad kursen ligger så är det ungefär en kursrabatt om 35%. Och det var en stor kursreaktion får man ändå säga när aktien gick ner 26% på torsdagen.
Varför gör Mendus den här kapitalanskaffningen då?
Det är en väldigt bra fråga. Och samtidigt som de presenterade det här, då presenterade de ju en strategisk allians med Thomas Eldered-bolaget som har ett sammanträffande då, Nortex Biologics om cellterapi-tillverkning. Sen kan man ju titta när man gräver lite djupare vad de ska ha det till. Så säger de att likviden ska gå från företrädesemissionen då ska täcka 24%. Det är utveckling av vid cell, det är den kandidat som ligger längst fram. Men tittar man på tidigare då Immunicum innan det blev Mendus så ska då 13% gå till utveckling av cell. Sen har de då fördelat på lite drygt en 50-del preklinisk forskning, men även samma mängd då som ska gå till processutveckling för stöd av tillverkning. Och man behöver ju kunna säkerställa att man kan tillverka läkemedlen också i allt större takt då, med tanke på att studierna blir större ju längre man kommer i forskningen och fas 3 är störst. Och sen någon gång i tiden så om man lyckas komma ut på marknaden då måste man ju kunna skala upp så man kan börja sälja där och få upp volymer av det. Så det gör de ju redan nu då, det kan man inte göra i sista minuten som sagt. Sen som alltid så är det allmänna företagsändamål och det är 19%.
Ja, det blir spännande att se. Aktien var alltså ner 26% på torsdagen, men du bedömer också som en bra och långsiktig kapitalanskaffning.
Ja, man behöver verkligen kapital i den här industrin och det har de ju säkrat här nu då. Och bra ägare såklart, fler det.
Absolut. Och sen har vi då Vicore som du säger visar styrka i sin kapitalanskaffning. Vad är det som är positivt här?
Alltså här tar du in 0,5 miljard, säkra finansieringen för fas 2B-studien under namnet Andas och bolaget är finansierade till första kvartalet 2027 och tittar man på vilken kurs de tog den till. Oj, alltså det är nästan ingen kursrabatt att tala om. Det var ju runt 1%. Och jag skulle nog säga så här. Nu är det ju flera stycken som är med och delar på den här emissionen och så. Men jag tror att de flesta där ute hade velat skriva sitt namn under den här. För det är ett styrketecken. Och normalt sett så brukar man få se kurserna falla efter sån här. Till exempel som en Mendus fall. Det är inte förvånande att aktien tappar 26% här. Men nu tittar du i Vicores fall. Plus 9%. Men jag tror det speglar lite den här styrkan med vad man kommer ut med kursrabatt och så. Tittar man för de mindre aktieägarna då som inte får ta del i den riktade emissionen, ja men de blir utspädda då om cirka 27%. Men de behöver inte hänga läpp för det. Dels så har du fått en kursuppgång på 9% då som sagt. Men om du inte vill bli utspädd så går det alltid att köpa aktier över marknaden och vill du behålla din position som du har haft och din storlek då, ja men då ska du titta på hur många aktier du har. Har du 100 så går du och köper 27 aktier till. Då ökar du med ditt innehav med 27% och sen är du inte utspädd längre. Men du måste ju ta vägen via marknaden.
Just det. Ytterligare en marknadsuppdatering då är att Index Pharma som har gått ganska knackigt de sista åren ändå var upp 50% den 1 juni, och det här efter att de ingick ett licensavtal med japanska Viatris för kobotolimod vid behandling av tarmsjukdomen ulcerös kolit.
Och det var marknaden i Japan?
Marknaden i Japan, precis. Och det här var allt för idag, och ge oss gärna en tumme upp och se oss igen om en vecka. Välkomna då!